starting to watch another show that's called Into the Badlands.
Yeah, oh,
Have
yeah,
you watched?
I love Into the Badlands.
Oh, you've
Um,
seen? Why haven't you mentioned it?
because it did have its finale, but I'm not quite sure if like it's like I feel like Into the Badlands is very it just has like specific people I think like it. It's like it's kung fu heavy. So if you're into like kung fu type of stuff, I feel like it's kind of into that niche of people that like that type
Kung
of
Fu.
thing.
Well, Kung Fu movie. Well, I'm surprised you hadn't mentioned it because I was like, I've been seeing it for a long time, like on the website that I download stuff from, and like I think I was like, oh well, you know what? It seems pretty cool. I'll check the reviews for it, and like the reviews for like season two have been like 100%. Like everybody loves season two
Mm.
of the
And then
show.
it got
Season one is
yeah.
apparently pretty rocky. Like it's like obviously like it's starting to as you always say, like it's trying to get figure out what it is, and then season two is really good. I don't know about the rest if season
Yeah, like
three or
season three
four.
was the last season, and I think it's just purely because they just didn't find its audience, and then AMC just canceled the show because they're just like, yep, no one's watching it. So it's a
Oh,
shame.
okay.
It's a shame. So I think
Oh,
like yeah, yeah.
so is it worth watching then?
I think it's worth watching it, at least like getting up to the second season, see what it's all about. It has a good cast of characters, and
But
yeah,
is
I think it's the
three
closest thing you really get to like a kung fu action TV show.
is season three good though?
Yeah, season three is pretty good. It's just that people were just kind of annoyed because what happened is they split the season in half, and
Hmm.
then and they usually never do that. So then when
Hmm.
the season three came out, the second half, they're just like, "Yep, we're just gonna rush everything and complete it all." So I think that's why a lot of people kind of like are mixed about season three is because they just rushed a lot of plot points. But then again, I
That's
think the show was on borrowed time, so I'm at least glad that it's gotten like at least three seasons. Like I feel these days, if you get 3 to 4 seasons on something, I'm very happy. But anyways, hello everyone, and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, blah blah blah, episode 66. Because I stuff up sometimes, but let's just roll with it. I'm your host, the Don, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Chowders. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. It's pretty cold, but we'll live through it.
You know what? You're right. It is really cold. I'm freezing my ass off at the moment, but hopefully we can get into some hot TV shows and movies today, including Brightburn, which is a movie you watched recently, John Wick 3, Supergirl season 4, which I recently watched, and Doom Patrol, which I guess is something we'll start off today with.
Mm-hmm.
It recently had its kind of finale episode, and yeah, well, what's your opinion of it?
Um, I think overall, like, if we're going to talk about the whole season as a whole,
Hmm.
I think it's very interesting and it puts it in a particular place. That I think most like it is very different. I think even when we did that mid kind of season review, we were kind of like I don't know, it was a point of contention from you where you were just kind of like, yeah, it doesn't really have it's like good, but it doesn't have the same like superhero antics of like something like a Flash or Arrow where they team up together and they fight. But very much so, this season is this show is very different. Which is really good because it is part of DC streaming service, and I feel like Titans is kind of like the generic, you would say, action superhero TV show, and I think one of the main reasons why I do like something like um, Doom Patrol is that it does really unique and interesting things with its plot, and it's very abstract. There's a lot of random things where like some episodes just focus on certain things, and I really do enjoy that. And then but there's obviously an overarching plot. For example, one of the episodes that did stand out this season was I think it's called Jane Patrol, where they go inside one of the characters, Jane, who has multiple personalities, and they go inside her head,
Hmm.
and you can see the physical persona of her personalities. But I think overall, the way the show ended, does put the team dynamic of the Doom Patrol in a very different light and how it's played out. So I feel like I'm more excited to see if this even gets a second season or what they actually do with it, because I really like the characters that they do show, and even if they don't have like awesome superhero powers or anything like that, I still feel like this show relies very much heavily on their characters and how they interact with each other, and struggling with their inner demons. But like overall, I feel like I really enjoyed Doom Patrol.
Yeah, yeah. I think I agree with a lot of your comments in regards to the creativity of the show. It definitely has and shows a lot of the kind of artistic nature of the show. There's a lot of cool cinematography, a lot of like eye candy in a lot of episodes. Kind of jumps around with some of the content. Some like this is the thing. The show can be quite silly at times, but I think it's one of those things that you can just kind of if you know the tone that it sets and you're okay with it, you roll with it. For example, there's an episode where they have to go inside a donkey that has like a like a pocket dimension inside it, and they have to escape from it. But then there's another episode which is probably one of the better episodes of the season where they accidentally release the 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 decreator, which is essentially this like giant eye in the sky that starts like destroying everything. And the solution to getting rid of it is going back in time and like creating a religion to form an entity to fight it, which I thought was really cool. And again, it the thing that was kind of good with the episode is it kind of brought back a lot of the antics of the show and brought it back and centers it towards the main plot because of again it kind of brings back like the main villain who actually helps the team to I guess destroy this decreator because it would also mean the end of the villain as well. So that was kind of cool. I kind of felt that the show does kind of go off and like again it's exploring the psychology and the background of a lot of these quote unquote superheroes. They don't refer to themselves as such, but superheroes who essentially like grew up like in pretty fucked up environments, to say the least. Like, one of the characters is like a married, closeted gay man, who died in a plane accident and has this alien entity stuck in its body. Like that just sounds like the craziest thing in the world, but within the context of the show, it makes a lot of sense, and you kind of like follow this character as he's kind of exploring all that and how to come to terms with it. You have another character who's just a brain in a robot, who finds out that he was responsible for not only his like wife's death, but then finds out his daughter is still alive, but he doesn't know how to reconcile it since he's still a robot and she probably thinks he's dead. So a lot of it is them kind of struggling with, some of the stuff that happens, but I feel like there's a lot of focus on it rather than kind of, there's several episodes that will just focus on their trauma, but it's not done in an organic way that goes towards the plot in any capacity. Like I think maybe Jane Patrol might have, which is the one episode where they're exploring Jane's kind of multiple personality because I think they kind of go back in time and you find out a little bit more about the chief and his relationship with her. But they don't kind of always do that with all the episodes, so it kind of feels like it's a little bit out of place until I think they get about the episode regarding Flex Mentallo.
Yeah. Which, by the way, like I didn't know who he was, but then I did some research on the guy. I'm like, man, this like if you are a fan of the Doom Patrol comics or you read them, this is like an insane deep cut of a reference, and it would be like a cool character. Like, oh my god, I can't believe like it's a live action thing. That's what I feel like. Like me reading about knowing about this character, I'm like, oh, like hardcore fans of this would be really psyched that this would have like it's like accurate to the comic.
Ah, okay, yeah, because again, I'm not familiar. I'm not too familiar with like the Doom Patrol outside of maybe reading them like like tangentially like a while ago in a comic or something or other. But yeah, like looking at like his character, like I just did a quick Google of how he looks. He's pretty comic accurate, like in the show. But yeah, like they basically have to break into the Bureau of Oddities to save him. And you find out that he actually worked alongside I think Clint, the sorry Larry, the pilot. And yeah, it's like they have to break into it and they have to break into it together. But then you also find out about the trauma of Cyborg with his father, and then oh, we have to use this and come together to try and find uh, you know the chief. Also, the one thing that I really liked is with Cyborg, I think his kind of feel was that the AI in him, Grid, was slowly turning him into a robot, right? Now, if you've watched or if you've read like any of the kind of New 52 comics, or if you've played like Injustice Gods Among Us, I think #2, they actually have like a Grid enemy who is basically like the evil version of Cyborg. He's like based on his AI that kind of like splits up from him and forms their own entity. So I don't know if they're gonna have Cyborg back for season 2 if they do have a Doom Patrol season 2, but I think that is something that they put in there to make you think like, oh, it's a red herring, but I think it's actually something that might be something of a bad guy for a cyborg and his character in the show.
Yeah, maybe because
So I get.
they do build up Cyborg quite a bit. Like I feel like out
Hmm.
of every single piece of live action media, this is probably the best Cyborg. Because then again, there's only been like Justice League, so I guess this is the
Yeah.
best one. Like,
Well, to be fair, I actually kind of liked Cyborg in the in Justice League. I think surprisingly he ended up being a better character than the Flash, and then Aquaman was like kind of like one dimensional in the movie. Like he's much better in his solo movie than in Justice League itself. But yeah, like unfortunately in the movie, Cyborg doesn't really have much to do or say outside of kind of being this kind of cold calculating robot. But he was kind of it was I liked him in the movie, but this show kind of goes that extra level to kind of explore his character on top of him being more of like uh a Teen Titans level hero, because that's kind of like what he used to be, like more lower class, even though his power set is technically much larger. um, but yeah, subsequently, I think like they kind of come back to like the main story eventually, but in my opinion, it kind of took like maybe 5 episodes to kind of get there. It's like it's 5 episodes of plot, and then it's not even completely correct in me saying that because there's a lot of kind of they'll go and they'll explore someone's character,
well, that's
whatever.
yeah. It's not only
But
that, but I think yeah, the villain Mister Nobody, even like when the fourth wall break, kind of had that whole thing where it's just like kind of a semi criticism where the show is just talking about characters rather than the plot of being a
mhm.
superhero show. I
And
thought that was pretty
yeah,
smart. That was pretty funny.
yeah, I actually like that too because I think the show even knows that like in a it's supposed to be kind of like a meta criticism at itself, but also maybe at critics of the show itself. Because maybe if you've already been watching it for so long, you should know that it's not just some superhero fight show, which I already knew as well. Because there's not like a lot of kind of fighting or anything kind of throughout the season. Um, but I think at the same time, like I think the fair way to kind of like describe the season would be like maybe at the beginning, like the first 5 episodes focus on, the plot, but then, a mix in between where they go, oh, little bit of plot and then a lot of side story stuff, and then they come back to it. I think a good way to kind of capture people in terms of like a narrative structure is organically integrating the side story to the main story. And maybe that's not something that's really easy to do with something like Doom Patrol, if they're doing like an adaptation of the comics or something like that. Like maybe a lot of the comics like aren't easy to adapt in this way, and subsequently this is what they had to do to kind of fit in like the show's vision, while also keeping faithful to the adaptation. And ultimately, like, they kind of leave the series, and I won't spoil it, but they kind of leave the series kind of open to the second season, and they do it really quickly. Like they kind of, we kind of like see the big bad being like this really difficult character to face, and they kind of deal with him pretty like offhandedly.
Mm.
And maybe that's kind of done because okay, they're leading up to a season two or a season whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
like yeah, I feel like the main villain is not really the I guess the main plot of this series. I
mhm.
think it was more about establishing certain characters. Who is Niles Calder? And I think you only really got exactly the truth of it. Maybe like the second to last
Some of
episode.
some of the truth to it,
Yeah,
yeah.
where it's just like because I think you got backstory on it. Like I think like episode 10,
I
9
think I think
about the
that
because they're in a snow area. Obviously, like what happened to
mhm.
Niles Calder? Who is he?
Yeah.
And then all these characters are kind of like, yeah, he's a bad guy. There's more that you need to know, and like
I
so
think I
far we've
think the
known
big
some more
twist
to it.
I think the big twist was like super obvious. I don't think that should really like if you're paying attention to the show, that shouldn't be a twist, and they make it out to be a really big twist. But I think the thing is like they kind of hand wave the villain, and then they introduce like a certain character that is the whole reason why Niles is keeping like a big secret, but then they don't go into it. Again, I think that's not really a good way to do uh, a season. Is kind of leaving it on a cliffhanger-ish. Like you, again, it's trying to get people to be invested in the second season, but people should be invested in the second season because of the show itself, which I think there are going to be people who are fans of the show. I'm a fan of this show. I just wish that it was done in a more kind of engaging way where you get the character moments and but you also get the story without kind of going too far off either way. Ultimately, it's a good show, and again, this is like a DC streaming service. And they're going to get not only better at it, but they're going to get potentially more creative with it because it's all done in-house as opposed to. And when I mean in-house, I mean like there's no kind of like Fox or some other kind of like TV executive telling them like how to do X or Y. Like this is going to be DC doing their characters in the way that they want to do it, and ultimately that's kind of what you want from something like Doom Patrol ultimately.
Mm.
Um, and and on top of that, they're also I think they released the what is it, the Swamp Thing
Yeah, the Swamp Thing
trailer.
trailer. Yeah, I haven't watched it, but
I
I,
haven't
I,
watched it
I watched
either,
the
but
first tease. I don't know anything about it, but like honestly, I'm pretty excited because I know Swamp Thing, the comic itself, the Alan Moore one. I think people really liked that, and I don't know. It looks like it's very much different. I think it's produced by James Wan, I think.
mhm.
So it's got like certain like horror undertones, and like it could be very interesting. And so
Well,
far,
I think
I think overall Disney, I mean not Disney, DC with their streaming service. So far, I've enjoyed the 2, 3 shows that they've got, including Young Justice. So
yeah. Well, I was gonna say the Alan Moore style of Swamp Thing is a more horror-esque Swamp Thing. I've been reading the current iteration of Justice League Dark, and even the New 52 version of Justice League Dark, I think also had Swamp Thing in it as well as a main member. But in Justice League Dark, he plays like he's one of the main characters who is kind of being involved in the big kind of magical invasion that's happening. Which, by the way, if you guys haven't read Justice League Dark, highly recommend. It's really good. The 2018 series that came out last year. It's still ongoing. I think there's only about like maybe 14 issues at the moment. But you can read it online, or hopefully there's some at your local comic book stores to get your hands on. But yeah, it's really high quality story. Art's beautiful. And if you're familiar with like it's also got one headlining the team, which I think is definitely a very interesting choice because I never really put the kind of emphasis on, oh, okay, yeah, like Diana comes from like, Themyscira. It's technically magical, so it makes sense to have her play a part in trying to investigate things magically related. But I guess I just never thought, oh, okay, she's headlining the team, let's do it that way, as opposed to having someone like Zatanna, who is on the team as well. Zatanna or Constantine, again, another character who's also on the team. They're usually the ones headlining the actual kind of
The team.
team itself, but they're having Wonder Woman do it, which I think is really cool because also she, because again, it kind of gives more branding to the actual comics. Like, oh, look, Wonder Woman's in this. They kind of do the same thing in like, a lot of other comics. You slap in a Batman or you throw in a Wolverine on a team and it gets eyeballs. And I think in very much the same way, it's the same thing, but they do it in a very organic way. So yeah, just a little sidebar. Would recommend Justice League Dark, the 2018 series. But yeah, overall, I like Doom Patrol. I just hope it just gets better with the storytelling aspect of the show, which I think it definitely will now that it's finished its kind of season one kind of explorations into the characters. So
Yeah,
I'm interested to see.
I think it needed that start point, so then it can kind of flourish into what else it could be. Because I feel like, as mentioned before, this show is very creative in its situations where it's like it's very abstract and it's just kind of like you just kind of go with it. Like in like the last like episode that they do stuff inside a painting, and I thought that's like it's cool. You don't really like. I didn't like really like. Obviously, the Marvel Netflix stuff. It's not as abstract. It's more realistic, so they don't really have that.
Mhm.
Or like,
More grounded,
yeah,
yeah.
like I don't really like. Is there much like what do you call it? The superhero stuff. Um, is there much stuff that's like abstract? Because like even something like Gotham, it's somewhat abstract, but somewhat grounded. Like I feel
Yeah,
like
I
there
mean,
hasn't really been any.
Gotham does like a balance of it. It's zany. It's like comic book. What is it like? You know, not Adam West style, but it's got like this kind of slapstick aspect of it, where it takes itself seriously, but not too seriously. Given the events that kind of happen in the show itself. Whereas Doom Patrol does not take itself seriously at all, and much to the credit of the show, because again, it deals with a lot of mature themes, but then it's kind of contrasted with the zaniness of what's happening in the actual episode itself. Whether you have like a bunch of like sentient butts trying to eat people, or
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
yeah, or like a dude who hunts people by eating their beard, right? Like it's this really kind of it's this weirdness in the show. But I think again, like personally, I think I enjoyed the Titans series over this, but again, like it's not a bad show. And again, if DC's producing this kind of quality content, especially before Marvel, it can definitely like gather up that kind of comic niche for people who are interested in a show, kind of a little bit different from like the average comic book show. So yeah,
Hmm.
watch Doom Patrol.
Yeah, I think Doom Patrol is pretty good. So that's Doom Patrol. We can talk about another. Well, you can another DC show that I think I might jump in after this for this season, because so far you've been touting it and you're like it's a pretty good show. So this is Supergirl season 4, which I've heard might be in risk of cancellation. So just be wary.
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not. Look, honestly, if it gets cancelled, I'm not gonna like shed many tears for it. Look, Supergirl, I think a lot of the casting choices are really, really good for it. But again, it can. I think it definitely had like a rocky first season, which I think was also an issue because they tried to have it on like a separate program as well. They had it on I think it was CBS, and not the CW network. So they were trying to like make it out to be like a more premium TV show where ultimately it's not really that I don't know, like that different from like any other CW TV show. If anything, it falls into a lot of the classic pitfalls that it usually does. But yeah, so yeah, Supergirl season 4. I think I talked about it a little bit, but it's kind of like following up from like the events of the previous season where um, there was like another version of Supergirl that was created after she got in contact with, I think, black kryptonite. Um, Now, in the show, it's referred to as Harrenel, but I believe the actual in universe stuff is called black kryptonite. Um, and essentially, there's like a lot of kind of issues following up from the previous season, because it gets revealed that the president of the United States uh, is an alien, which is kind of a really big deal. Actually, I think it might have. Actually, I think it might actually happen this season, not last season, but it is
Because it
something
does
that's
that
like,
CW break midway through. So I think like you talked about it last year, but around October, November, which would have been this season.
yeah, that's correct. But I think even in the previous season, they like made a reference to the fact like it was one of those things where it's like, Supergirl meets the president of the United States, and in this brief moment, like you can see that the president's like face, like I don't know, like changes in some way, and it looks more alien-like, and so you find out, oh shit, like the president's an alien, you know. Um, but I think in the show they don't. It's really weird. They kind of make it out to be a big deal, but it's only temporary, right? Like, the president of the United States is kind of revealed to uh, be an alien who eventually enacted a policy that allowed for the United States to make aliens citizens of the United States. So the thing is, like, in terms of like policies and like influencing a country's like political landscape, it's definitely like a really big deal when you have a foreign entity like literally interfering with it. But they really hand wave it off in the actual show itself. But just to kind of gather, I think a lot of the things about Supergirl in the past is they kind of used to do a little bit of like referencing to current politics. But this season it's like kind of turned up to an 11 because you have essentially have a Supergirl who is in a kind of I guess like European Balkan country. I think it's called Kaznia, fictional, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's really funny that like DC does decide to go with like the fictional route with a lot of countries. That you obviously know is like an allegory for like some other country in a similar location.
I think it's fine. Like like
Oh no, no,
Star City, all
I
that.
don't think it's
Yeah.
bad. I just find it funny.
Right.
Even they do it with like domestic countries. Like they uh, even refer to like there's always this mystery behind where Gotham and Metropolis is, because like they often refer to themselves as being like sister cities. But it's like you have to go past New York. So okay, New York exists, and it's like, oh, but it's near Detroit. Okay, so it's near Detroit. So like
So
where
it's
does
not
it?
really a sister city at all.
Yeah, so, no, well, that's the thing. Like, they, because there was a big discussion about like, oh, like what is Metropolis and what is Gotham, and I think they used to say that like, uh, Metropolis is New York by day, and then Gotham is New York by night, right? But then I think officially like they said that, oh, like Gotham is supposed to be Detroit, and then Metropolis supposed to be some other kind of city. Like I don't know. Look, my American geography is not that great. But yeah, the one thing that's okay. So you have obviously there's foreign entity and Kaznia that's potentially influencing the American government, and that's obviously supposed to be a reference to I think the whole investigation that's happening in America with Donald Trump and Russian investigations. Because the big kind of thing with this season is there's a reference to Red Sun, because and they even call the Kaznian raised Supergirl as Red Daughter, right? So it's obviously a big reference to the Superman comic Red Sun, would highly recommend it. Basically, Superman, instead of falling into Metropolis in America, he falls into a state in Russia and gets brought up by Stalin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, seeing like, what the character becomes, and, Lex Luthor ends up being his antagonist, but an antagonist from like a perspective of like American capitalism versus Russian, what is it? Socialism? Yeah, stuff like that.
Stuff like that.
So yeah, well, I mean, part of my ignorance. It's been actually a while since I've read some, but it's a really really good
It's one of those really good
uh
ones, which I heard they might turn that into. That's one of the rumor
oh,
mills.
if they do,
I
it'd be
know.
really
Well,
cool.
they
But
Brightburn is pretty close already there. So
okay, was Supergirl kind of be well? The thing is, Superman in the comic itself, while a typical, not necessarily a bad guy. That's the thing. It's not like Hitler's like Superman raised by the Germans, which was something that was in the comics as well. Also, really good comic. I think it was for Multiversity event in 2017. But yeah, so there's that happening overseas, and while domestically, there's also kind of like an anti-alien movement that's happening, and this is kind of brought about by a former historian called Agent Liberty. So the big thing the two best episodes in this season, in my opinion, are both centered around the two villains. The first villain is Agent Liberty, who's essentially he's a former historian who, he used to be a historian. He worked at a university teaching history, and it kind of centers around him and how in the past three seasons, season one, two, three, how his life has been affected rather, due to Supergirl, really, because of like the several alien invasions that have happened. Like I think there's been the people, from the previous season, they've tried to invade and take over Earth in some capacity, and how he's like lost his home, his father has lost his like iron business or something like that, and subsequently, like later throughout the season, he like loses people he loves due to the battle and due to aliens, right?
mm-hmm.
And in that particular episode, you kind of see, oh, like during season one, he was here and this happened, and then during season two, he was over here and then this event happens, and then season three, this final event kind of was like the final story. It's like one of them was like losing his job, and then he kind of becomes like a bit of a like a political, like kind of like a political commentator, like being very anti-alien, which again is like supposed to be a big contrast to like immigration in America at the moment. So again, it's like anti-alien rhetoric. Although I think it kind of the comparison kind of fails because the American president was temporarily an alien, so it's kind of like a justified fear of aliens. But they kind of really ham it up in the show for people to be like ridiculously, ridiculously hateful of aliens rather than like a more justified fear for them because they can either shape shift or pretend to be someone that they're not. Most of the aliens in the show are actually like good people, and they're not trying to harm anyone, and they're trying to go about their business. I think that just comes down to like the show having good ideas but not executing them well. But to go on to the second coolest episode is an episode centered around Lex Luthor. So he's the second.
When was he like when was he introduced into Supergirl?
So he was introduced, I think I want to say in an episode called Brother, Where Art Thou? So it's episode 15 of this season.
All right, so he's
Um,
recent. Yeah, I thought it was like
yeah,
previous season, this season. Is he at least good
I think I think I
characterization?
think well, he's been mentioned in the previous seasons, but it's this season that we actually see him, and he's really good. Again, as I mentioned, uh, they kind of, with Agent Liberty's character, they kind of like start him out to be a pretty like like kind of, I often kind of use this um description for villains all the time, where you kind of have a killmonger kind of character, where it's like you understand where the villain comes from and his motivations and how he got there, but you don't necessarily agree with like what he does and like the actions he takes and other aspects of his morality. I think that's where Agent Liberty does really well, like how his character kind of develops initially, but they kind of making him into like a ham-fisted villain towards the end, which is a bit of a shame. The other character, Lex Luthor, great villain. When he gets introduced, you kind of see that he's been playing like a everybody like a big puppet, like all the stuff that's happening in Kaznia, all the things happening domestically in America. It's all happening because you have it's not too much of a spoiler because it's going to be really obvious the moment he introduces it's Lex Luthor. He plays like chess in his sleep. I'm pretty sure they even have him
Fourth dimensional
playing chess at
chess.
one. I'm pretty sure they have him playing chess or chess related things in the actual show itself. So again, it's cool, and especially having him in it, you kind of get to see, you get to delve into the mind of Lex Luthor and how he thinks and how he kind of gets to the point where he is. So yeah, there's the episodes that's kind of centered around him and what he's been doing in the past couple of years and how it kind of leads to this event and this season. Later on in the show, like they have him don his like classic green mecha suit, and they do like a, they kind of do like an literally like an Iron Man styled like shot where it's showing his face and all the visualizations like of the screen and stuff. And I thought that was a really cool kind of homage to the Iron Man kind of series where they have that you know I guess the suit UI there, but instead like say like LexCorp or whatever in the corner or something like that. So with all that kind of stuff, that's really cool. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting ideas that's explored in this season, and I think like it's probably got, this season has the best villains compared to the previous seasons. The previous seasons, I think some of the CW TV shows and or to honestly, to be fair, like a lot of classic comic books typically have villains that are, oh, they're the same version of it's like exactly the same person as the main character, but they're evil, right? Like you have the Flash, and his evil version is the Reverse Flash. You have like Arrow, season one is, oh, it's another guy who can shoot arrows as well. It's kind of like that kind of villain. Whereas this season it's more to do with and I think usually the best kind of villains for somebody who is like kind of like a godlike entity like Superman or Supergirl is usually people who you can't directly fight, because it has to do with like their ideas, like the idea of like Lex Luthor, like Lex becomes the president in like some iterations of his character, and so the scary thing isn't that, oh, he's super smart and he can make like a cool exosuit and stuff like that. It's more to do with the fact that, okay, now he has like political influence and he's gonna make himself out to be like a good guy and trick everybody into thinking Superman's doing a bad thing, right?
Mm.
Those are the kind of villains that are good because they have to make the character like question what they're doing rather than it's kind of like they always talk about like in maybe in a potential Superman video game is you don't give Superman a health bar, you give like the city a health bar, if that makes sense. Like if there's too much destruction in the city, then you fail the mission.
Yeah.
Because it's like giving Superman a health bar is kind of dumb. Honestly speaking, it's like as long as he's exposed to the sun, like even there's been iterations I think during the Dark Knight Returns, like Superman literally absorbs like I guess solar radiation from plants. That's literally something that he can do. So that's the thing, it's kind of really hard to kill. So yeah, having villains that are kind of complex in the sense that, okay, you kind of understand where they're coming from, and they have to kind of fight them in a more abstract way. Yeah, so ultimately, I think this has probably been the most interesting season, but ultimately, I think it does fall flat in terms of certain kind of ideas that it tries to present. I think ultimately they have like a new character called Dreamer. She's kind of like I think she's oh, that's right, she's a trans woman who is like the ancestor of I think Dream Girl, who's like from the future. Like I think Brainiac 5, he's essentially kind of the replacement for the nerdy kind of
Know-it-all
character.
character.
Yeah, they always have one in all. They have Felicity play the tech character in Arrow. They have Cisco play it in The Flash, and they used to have Toyman's son, like the son of Toyman, be that character in Supergirl, but they had him kind of go off this season, and they replaced him with Brainiac 5, who's from the Legion of Superheroes, which is like from the year 3000, right? Where there's like a Justice League-ish thing there. And he's like a Brainiac, but good. But they do introduce that, oh, hey, maybe he's going to go bad. Who knows? So yeah, there's some cool things that they have here and there. But I think a lot of the setup and a lot of the ideas are really cool. And it's really nice to see them kind of not pull punches when it comes to exploring those things. It's just the issue is like, again, we're talking about CW here. They're going to explore these things to some degree, but never with the complexity that you maybe might want in a show that introduces things like some of the stuff that they do. But yeah, ultimately, if you like Supergirl, the TV series, like it's probably the best season that's come out so far. And yeah, if you said that it's on the chopping block of leaving, I can imagine like maybe that's the reason why they decided to go a little bit more kind of you know gung ho with like some of the stuff that they're exploring. But yeah, with Arrow finishing up, like I wouldn't be too surprised if some of these shows kind of wrap up in some capacity. But Arrow's leaving and probably being replaced by Batwoman. So I don't think all the shows are going to be going away. Maybe just shows that don't do as well.
Or they just need a refresh because it's been like 8 years since like
Yeah, I think
2011. Like it's kind of like not many shows really get past that point, or even like 5-ish seasons these days.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing though. With something like Supergirl, I think the thing that they can probably do is if they do something like they have the big crisis event that's happening. If they do something like, okay, the universe blows up and oh, hey, this version of Supergirl is actually not in a alternate universe, which is what they made it for some reason, which was really dumb. But they made it that oh, actually, this version of Supergirl is actually in our universe, and that would give them an ability to have kind of Batwoman interact with Supergirl, and then you can have like the world's finest, like but rather than Batman and Superman, you have Batwoman and Supergirl. So I think there's some pretty cool things that you can maybe do if as like a refresher, as you said, like the Infinite Crisis story that they have planned up will probably be that potential soft reboot. But I mean, I think some of the shows should kind of wrap up. Like, I mean, I finished watching, um, I think the other DC series. I'm forgetting what it is.
Black Lightning,
Nah, not Black. Actually, I haven't finished Black Lightning.
Legends of
I should.
Tomorrow.
Legends of Tomorrow. That's it. That's another show that I recently finished, which I'll probably get into like maybe some other time. But like, yeah, like that show it kind of seems like it's just trying to. You see, there we go. You see, that's probably a show that's up there with the zaniness of Doom Patrol. That's probably what I'll throw in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, pretty
But
much.
they're both from DC, so I guess that doesn't count, right? Because they're both doing it's the same company doing the zany stuff. So yeah, like it yeah, it's like it's gonna get too many characters at some stage, and so I don't know like what they're gonna do going forward. But well, actually, I know what they're doing going forward for Supergirl. Might be an interesting season. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, for you, Don, I think this is probably gonna be the most consumable season of Supergirl for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend this season, but maybe not so much like the previous seasons. Also, I think the guy who plays Agent Liberty, Sam Witwer, I'm pretty sure he does the voice of Darth Maul. That's also something that I recently kind of found out because I'm like, oh, because I was watching a video on YouTube where his character kind of made like a guest appearance and he was teaching somebody how to talk as Darth Maul, and I'm like, wait, is he the same guy? Like,
It's like,
and then I
what?
tried to find, and then I tried to find like whether he was on like Supergirl. I was like, oh, he is. Oh, he's that character. Oh, perfect. That's so cool. So I didn't know that, but that's also some bonus.
See, that's what we do. We drop facts for you, you know?
Yeah, we fact check here.
Yeah, none of these yeah, I think we mentioned before, none of these are really fake rumors. We have to be 100% accurate like the Star Wars one, you know? Like,
Hey, we were 100% accurate with
yeah,
that.
I knew it. I'm like, yeah, there's no way. But yeah.
Well, yeah. The other storyline in the show that's a bit, it's not too interesting is the fact that I think Jimmy Olsen gets kind of superpowers temporarily because he gets infected by the black kryptonite. And so, it's kind of like I think in some ways because they had Jimmy Olsen play like like a superhero called like Guardian, really lame. He's basically like a knockoff Captain America. I thought it was pretty dumb because I kind of find that they kind of do this too much with a lot of these TV shows where, oh, they have a character, let's also make them a superhero. It's like, no, certain characters can be relegated to side characters, and that's it.
Or what's
So
the point of being special about it, you know? It's kind of like whatever.
yeah, like I mean, look, like sometimes it works well and organically, like in Arrow, where you have like Thea Queen, his sister turns out to be like from like partly from Moira, partly from I think I forget the character's name, but he's like the magician character. He's not the magician, but he's like he's like the Black Arrow, not really Black Arrow, but whatever his character is. It's kind of done organic. Oh, sorry, it's kind of done organically. So I kind of really like how that works. But then there's other characters where it's like, the Flash's girlfriend is also knows how to shoot like plasma guns for some reason. It's like just have certain characters be just side characters, and I think it's the same with someone like Jimmy Olsen. It although the one thing that's kind of good about it, or I don't know if this is what they went for, but the one thing that it might be a reference to is sometimes in the old kind of superhero comics they'll have some kind of really crazy plot where it'll be like Jimmy Olsen with the powers of Superman find out how in this comic, right? And they'll have this like ridiculous like it's like clickbait before clickbait
Pretty much.
in
It's
these
just like,
comic
buy
books,
this
right?
issue. You're like, oh, crap, I guess I have to.
Well, yeah, because it'll be like, oh, Superman, kills a baby, and he'll say something crazy. It's like that baby needs to die, but then you read the actual comic, and it's like got nothing to do
It's
with
like
what's on the
possessed alien baby.
yeah, yeah, but or it might not even have anything to do with what's on the front cover. Like that's sometimes like what they'll do, like or they'll tangentially have like they'll mention like a villain and the villain will be front cover, but then the villain doesn't appear until like the very last panel. Again, it's clickbait before clickbait, but it could be a reference to that. I don't know. But yeah, season 4 of Supergirl, probably the best season of it so far. But obviously it still suffers from kind of like not going through with the writing and maybe too much plot threads. But yeah, have a watch if you like Supergirl. But if you don't, you can probably give it a pass.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that's Supergirl. I might give it a shot this time. But speaking of superhero stuff, but people having powers, but maybe turning evil, is I watched the what is it? The movie called Brightburn, which is it's not a James Gunn movie. He produced the movie, but I think his DNA is in this film, and even then, like the when I saw the credits, I was shocked at how many Gunn brothers or relatives there were that are in the industry, because I know that like one of his brothers is like he plays Rocket Raccoon, like as in this
Oh, okay.
he's the guy dresses up in the CGI and like actors
Oh, all
read
right.
to him, and then like Bradley Cooper puts his voice on it, so he's kind of like the stand-in. He's there.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, this is written by Brian Gunn and Mark Gunn. So there's like basically they just had this idea, which is, as mentioned before, is kind of very similar to the Red Son of Krypton storyline, kind of in a similar way, because in Red Son of Krypton, obviously it's landing in Russia, and like what if he did, he was an oppressor, and this is more like what if a kid from space came down to Earth who had basically superhero like Superman's powers, which is like flying, more or less invincible, has laser eyes, but instead of helping people, basically being a villain, and basically the way this approach the way the movie approaches it is first and foremost a horror film. It's not some sort of superhero semi I'm gonna turn bad type of thing. It's not a thriller of sorts. I feel like this is very much hardcore. Like this is a horror film, in that respect. So it is very much filmed like a horror film, where it's got certain angles, the way it shoots certain things, where certain things could be quiet and all of a sudden it gets really loud. But yeah, overall, I feel like I really enjoy this movie. This movie right now has like maybe like a 6.5, 7 out of 10 kind of look on a lot of ratings, but I don't know if that's just review bombing or not. But I honestly feel like maybe people just don't like this film. I don't know, certain things in the plot, which I obviously won't reveal, but that people might not like.
Okay.
But I really enjoy this film and how it approaches things, because especially when we live in such a time where superhero stuff is literally everywhere. It's good to have this juxtaposition of, hey, like if there was an alien from outer space, and certain things happen, like what would happen if they turned evil? Would we be able to stop it? So I found that very interesting. The kid who plays the evil guy, which is his name in the movie is Brandon Breyer. His name's Jackson. He does a phenomenal job. He kind of reminds me of the kid who played the original Omen. It's got that very like unsettling tone to him, and he's not a mute though. Like he talks. He has a personality where it's kind of very early on, like I won't really spoil too much, but it's very early on where he gets this whole thing where he feels like he needs to fix the world. He needs to rid of everything that's wrong with the world. Like he is the savior of the world, and if people stop him for his quest to help the world, then they deserve to die. So that's kind of like his kind of juxtaposition. And it's kind of played in a very weird way where, since he's a little kid, he talks like he's like making threats basically to adults. It's kind of laughable at times, but at the same time, it is very much creepy, where you're just like, yeah, this kid's kind of a psychopath. And he kind
Well,
of, yeah.
I was gonna say, like, perhaps like, it does kind of sound silly when it comes from a child, but when the child actually has like the the backing, it's like there's a difference between somebody threatening you and then making the same threat while holding a gun, right? It's like you're going to be more intimidated by the guy with the gun just purely because he has the capacity to harm you in a much more direct way. So I guess in very much the same way, that's probably why he probably seems creepy. I was going to say, like, it is his descent into, I guess, becoming a horror supervillain in some capacity. Is it kind of done in like a stereotypical fashion where it's like, oh, he gets bullied by kids and then or is it always from like he has this mindset where he needs to make the world better, and that's the kind of driving factor that makes him into what he is?
I feel
Why
like,
why the
yeah,
and
yeah,
why the creepy scarecrow mask? Like
yeah.
that I think is creepy.
Yeah,
Like no,
I feel
no.
like, yeah, that's his like persona thing. He kind of creates for
Okay.
himself. But yeah, the main reason why he got evil, I think it's a bit of both, because I don't think it's much of a spoiler, but in a sense, I think it's like the first 10 minutes where he can hear voices in his head, that's kind of attracting him to certain things. So it's basically just him doing that, but then, he does certain things that, creep people out at school. He thinks it's normal. And there's this really good scene between him and one of the girls at school. They basically have it's not really a relationship, but he's kind of a very much of a stalker. And there's one scene there's one scene about 40 minutes down that is absolutely creepy. When he's talking to this little girl.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, so there's that. One thing I should note is that this film is very gory. I wasn't when I went into when I went into this movie, I'm like, yeah, normal horror stuff, but yeah, it's very blunt in its horror. It's very much Saw almost, where you do see quite a lot of blood. You do see organs as well. So just a little bit of a heads up. But yeah, but the way people die is very creative.
Yeah, I remember seeing in the trailer there was something like glass or something going into a character's eye, or they imply that it's gonna go into the eye, and it's just ooh boy. I'm not a big fan of.
That's a scene. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of I don't think I'm the type who could ever wear contacts, so having something literally piercing an eye is definitely ooh thing.
Yeah, when I first saw that, I was like, oh no. But it's such a good scene. Even the way even just the way it's shot, not even just the eye, but it's part of a bigger sequence. Kind of the build up towards it, the music, the tension, really well done in that end.
Yeah, cool. So would you recommend this to somebody who is a traditional kind of comic watcher, or would you kind of tell them, oh well, this is more of a...
Yeah, I'd say very much it's this is very much a traditional horror film. But even just to it just depends on who the people who watch the comic book stuff is. For example, if it's you and me, and then we're just kind of we know the genre, we know all this stuff, and then just yeah, we want to see a different take on it. Yeah, this is a really good solid take on something like this. But I think for I'd like to say, but for the normies, for example, it would just oh yeah, doing this and that, superhero stuff, and then they see this. I feel like this is very much a different genre. And I feel like this should be a hit. I want this to succeed. It's very different, and I think we need more stories kind of like this. It as I mentioned before, it's shot really well, especially when it comes to the tension. The two actors who play the parents are also pretty well done as well, and it shows kind of their conflicting emotions between, he's our kid, but he's not really our kid because we found him, or he's starting to do really creepy, evil stuff. What should we do? All the way to even just what I do like the characterization of the parents is that they think it's just puberty almost. Where the mom and dad are just yeah, I think you need to have the talk, and then they have the talk, and then it just turns out that the kid turns even creepier because of it. So there's a lot of oh
gosh.
So yeah, there's a lot of random stuff where I'd say not for the faint heart, but it's done really well. And yeah, I think it's just really good because it is something creative and very different, especially when it comes to just the what if storylines that I feel now in a time of if we're playing the meta game. Now in the superhero thing, I feel like this is where we start to see the branches out of these different type of things that aren't 100% superhero antics, but what if stories, or something that isn't purely based on Marvel or DC, but is something creative and interesting. I remember Chronicle from nearly 10 years ago. I think when that came out, that was a big deal. Because that was still a superhero type thing. It was just very different, where it's Handycam, and it was just more three teenagers had these powers. What happens when they get corrupted by this power, and if they can steal money and stuff like that. So I feel this kind of belongs in the camp of something like a Chronicle, where it's these come in once in a while, but inside the genre, but it completely changes the game of it. So I feel Brightburn is very much a movie that people should see, especially if you're into superheroes. I feel this is a good Like this is basically it's basically Superman. Like I think I saw a meme of someone drew a photo of Superman spanking the kid.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So I found that very funny.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it kind of reminds me, like, yeah, I definitely agree because kind of genre, because that would probably include like something like Jumper, right? I don't know if you remember Jumper.
Yeah, yeah, I
Like,
remember Jumper. That was like a failed what is it? A failed like franchise starter, which was
was it
like
supposed to be a franchise?
yes, I think that's one of the main
Oh
reasons why people
gosh.
didn't like it because it was like we're gonna start this story but never end it. It's like that
Mm,
Jumper, like Iron Number 4, Mortal Instruments, City of Bones. There were so many during that time where they're just like we're gonna be the new thing, and but they cram everything in one movie that's like wait for the next one, never comes out. So I feel like
it's
that was
always a
kind of an
bad
early time,
idea.
yeah, which never should happen. But yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of like Looper, but it's good.
Is there a sequel potential for this movie?
Um, yeah, I suppose it doesn't start a cinematic universe where there's so many and then everyone comes together. Like, they could try to do something like that where there was a cinematic universe, but it's never specified how things are done. Especially when it comes to they never really specify, and this is what I like about the movie as well is they never specify where he comes from, who he is,
Hmm.
his whole purpose, kind of thing. Like, so they very much keep the alien stuff kind of hush hush, even just the reveal of it, because it's like very early on in the movie, you don't really see the crashed ship, you don't see them carrying the baby. It kind of jump cuts straight into the action. And then it gets slowly revealed over time throughout the plot. I feel like that is a much more organic and better way to do it. So it kind of keeps the mystery. Like we don't see the ship of where it comes from up until like the first 20 minutes at least 20-30 minutes, which I feel like this movie does do. It pulls back a lot of the stuff until you get it, so it's a slow reveal over time, and I think that's one of the good things about this movie. It just slowly reveals over time. So yeah, I'd say go watch it because I really enjoyed my time with it, and I think it's pretty different, and that's what I like.
Yeah,
um,
no, that's good. I was gonna say, like, I definitely need to um get my ass up and actually watch this movie as well because it does seem like when you mentioned it on the podcast, like I hadn't heard of it. Like I think maybe a couple of months ago. But it definitely does seem something right up my alley. Speaking of something that I haven't watched that's also right up my
mhm.
alley, you've also seen John Wick 3.
Yes, I saw John Wick
So tell
3.
us about it.
Well, John Wick 3, and basically the John Wick series is pretty much the modern day equivalent to like all good action films that came from the 70s and 80s, but instead of it being cheesy, it's done in a very great way. Like I feel like John Wick 3 is amazing. Like so far this is the best film that I've seen this year. Um
Oh
and
wow, really?
yeah. Like obviously
Okay.
we're still early in the year, but
Early in the year, yeah, yeah.
but still I feel like this is everything that I've kind of wanted from a sequel, and it's like that's the crazy thing. Like John Wick 1, 2 and 3 all solid really great films, like, and it's amazing to see a third one in a franchise, in a series that still holds up to its potential and be glowing with the reviews, and just keep on recreating itself and doing something always different and creative situations. And yeah, this one kind of sets off after the second one, where John gets excommunicado. So he's kind of on the run from everyone, and he has kind of a strategy to kind of get back to the point, get back into the good graces. I don't want to reveal any much from there because it's pretty much uh, action, action, action all out, but it's done
Mhm.
in a non-tiring way. Aside from one of my
Mhm.
friends who did watch it with me, and he's just like, yeah, after like the last like 30 minutes, I was just so tired. Like, so I feel like if you're not an action type person, this thing might tire you out. Um,
Mhm.
but it just throws out so many situations. It kind of reminds me of the Raid films where they just have so much, like they have swords, they have hand to hand fights, and they have gun fights.
Mhm.
And pretty much John Wick encapsulates that. It keeps the style of the rest of the John Wick films, which is very much I can't believe you haven't watched any of the films. But I think
I know. I'm ashamed as well. Don't worry.
it's just one of those things where it's like you hear about it, you're like, is it that good? But you're like, yeah, it's pretty good.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I know John Wick is good. It's just like I haven't got around to watching it. That's the thing. Like, again, it's a commitment problem that I have, where it's like, it's like, 2.5 hours. Oh, I don't know if I can watch that. But then I'll watch like 9 episodes of a TV show. Like it's this weird thing that I have, which I think I definitely know for sure that a lot of people also feel like that. Also, I've also feel that like with a lot of movies for me is usually something that I do with others, right? Um,
I feel like that's
so
what it's
I
turned
think
into, like in a situational type of thing, where most people
yeah,
feel
but
like they need to like binge watch a show so they can progress at their own pace. But like a movie is like a set, like this is you can't just stop midway through a movie and watch it like the next day type of thing. Like it's gonna
mm,
it's a
it's
communal
like
thing almost.
yeah, it's like if I'm gonna watch Aladdin, I have to watch it with my friends because nostalgia and like Will Smith. Like I don't know. It's like this whole thing. But also I think the length is also quite important. Because it's kind of weird to stop an hour into a film, whereas it's not weird to watch an hour of a TV episode and go to sleep.
Mm.
But I do know of people who do that kind of thing. Like they'll watch like half an hour of a film at work, and then on their next break, they'll watch the next half and so on and so forth, and they'll get through a film like that. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely a way that you can do films, but I don't know. I kind of feel like films need to be done in like a sitting. I always feel like that's the case, but apparently this kind of movie is action packed. Like I remember seeing the trailer for this film where I think like I don't know, they're like in some kind of weapon store, like an antique weapon
Oh
store, and
yeah.
they just like realize like, oh shit, we need to kill each other. So they start like smashing the like glass to like
Mm.
try and grab like a knife or something like that. Like it was a really cool scene. And what you see in the trailer is only like a snippet of it, but
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
seems like
Like
pretty
that's
interesting.
like that's like that scene is probably my favorite action scene. Um
Okay.
and I think that's the glory of John Wick is that it like I feel like okay, 'cause there's a few things that would make the John Wick formula why it's so successful, and I think why it resonates with
Mhm.
a lot of people. One of it's gung fu, which I think is just copyrighted by the guys of John Wick, where it's like close up gunfights, but not only that, but it's done in such a way where when people shoot, they shoot with their hands, like they pop it up and down. It has a certain rhythm to it, where like for
Mhm.
example, if you watch the Raid films, like if someone kicks, they don't just kick once, it's like kick and the kick twice. So it kind of has this music rhythm. So you always expect the sound. The sound's
To
always
go
really
with
well
the
done, but you always try to hit this kick, punch, punch, punch. Like it has a certain rhythm to it. And so like the fight scenes are always energetic that way, shot really well. Once again, Keanu Reeves does his own stunts. He's pretty much he's like the top tier action star these days. Like I don't think many people like we don't really have Stallone or Schwarzenegger kind of in the modern thing aside from like a Jason Statham, pretty much almost.
I
But like
think
yeah,
Well, I think like you have characters like The Rock and you have big characters like that, but I think the thing is like they're all in Fast and the Furious, right? Like Fast
mm,
and the Furious is kind of like the modern action like film like that, Schwarzenegger-esque film. Like they all have all those characters in that film, whereas like John Wick is kind of doing its like Rocky Rambo, Terminator-esque kind of thing on its own, and with freaking Neo,
mm-hmm.
as the front liner for it. Like, what more could you want?
Yeah,
One thing that I
they even
wanted
have
to
those.
kind
They
of
even have that little bit of a thing because Keanu Reeves is in it, as well as Lawrence Fishburne's in it. Uh,
Yeah, I did see Lawrence. Is he? Has he always been in the series, or is this the first
yeah,
time that he?
he's always been. I think after
Okay.
the second one onwards.
Okay, okay. The one thing I wanted to just mention, I don't know if you've seen the movie Equilibrium,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe that's the movie that introduced. I think they call it Gun Kart. and it's essentially this kind of it's like a martial arts that involves the usage of like shooting guns, but they're not at the same time using it for stylistic fight. I think that's the first like iteration of like that kind of gunfighting kung fu-esque kind of thing. I love it. It's so impractical and dumb, but
But it
it
looks
looks
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
It looks cool as fuck in a movie or a TV show.
Yeah, and
So yeah, they
I
have that
think
shit.
yeah, it does have that shit. It's definitely right up your alley. As well as I was mentioning before, the sound effects are really good. Even just like this is what I kind of want in the future. Is I want a Batman film shot in the action of a John Wick film, where like the hand to hand combat. Because my problem with modern day action I've had it for a very long time with a lot of the Marvel films is that things feel floaty. You don't really feel the impact of punches, but very much the people who do the sound on this, as well as the way they show things, I feel like sound is very important, and they do really good things. When you hit the punch, you can really feel it. Like when you hear people slice with their sword, you can really feel it. And I feel like that's what makes John Wick so special, is that there's a lot of special care and attention to these little small details that make the movie a lot more visceral, and like there's a bit like I've watched this movie twice in the cinema, and every single time when there's certain action scenes happening, you can hear people go, "Oh, ooh," and like because they can really feel it, and like they sometimes get squirmish almost. And I think it's very special to have that, because not many movies do that these days, or if they do, they don't really spend that much time to. It's not just a small amount of time to do it. So yeah, there's a lot of action set pieces in this film, but the basic, because you don't have to watch any of them, but the thing is you get so much more out of it anyways.
Oh yeah, don't worry, I'm watching all of them. Don't worry.
Yeah, because like the first one's just got to do with like his wife dies of cancer and he gets left a dog, and
They
then
killed his dog.
yes, they
Damn
killed
it.
his dog. So then he goes out for revenge, and
Of
then
course.
so that's one part of why John Wick is so special. The second part of why John Wick as a franchise is really special is because of the world building. We always mention many times, if you have really good world building, wants us to see spin-offs, you want us to see more of it. And that's what most people said about the first John Wick, and we got it on the second one as well as this one and the third one, where they keep it close to the chest, and then they kind of expand it a little bit more, and you're a little bit more interested, because the running joke with John Wick is that everyone knows who he is. Like every single assassin, everyone in the agency knows who he is, because he is the best at the best. So everyone's just like, oh man, I can't believe you killed his dog. Like, how could you? And even in the third one, they expand more about the world of these assassins. They visit people who, because they have these special coins, they visit someone who smelts the coins. That they explain a lot about. In this one, it's called like the people on the table, which are basically the big bosses of this assassination ring. So there's a lot of like showing who John Wick is, but as well as the agency is, and I really enjoyed it. It's very much, it's really cool to see it, as well as like the humor in this film is actually really good. Like you wouldn't expect an action film with this type to have really good humor, but it does. It's done so great. All three John Wick films, but I think John Wick 3 hit a really good like middle ground, where there's some really funny parts, there's really funny characters as well, and yeah, I just really enjoyed this film. The action is so amazing. Like there's parts where they fight in like a little glass area which has mirrors. You got to fight in, as you mentioned before, in kind of like this museum. So they have knives, they have old guns, and there's a whole motorcycle race sequence. Like there's so many good things in this film, and it's shot really beautifully. I think it's one of those things. It's shot in a digital camera, and it looks really beautiful. And I think whoever did the cinematography on this really knows what they were doing, because there's bits in this movie where they show the desert, and the desert looks amazing. Like the way they shot it, the way the sand looks, and the shadows and everything. I was just like, this movie does really look beautiful, and yeah, I just really enjoy it. Keanu Reeves is like up there now. I think everyone's just talking about Keanu Reeves right now because he's just a nice guy and he's a really cool guy. And everyone just does their really great parts. You know, like Halle Berry as a new addition to this film does a pretty good job as well. She gets a whole action sequence with her two dogs. That one's pretty good. That one's pretty good. Obviously, she doesn't have the physicality of Keanu Reeves, so there's not as many like physical hard hitting stuff or kind of like these one long take shots. But she does really great into the whole franchise. People like Ian McShane, Lawrence Fishburne, and like all the expanding cast do really great jobs on who they are, and yeah, I'm just really in love with John Wick because they just do really great things in this franchise, and yeah, and I just find it really interesting, and it's like I think this is the modern evolution of where action movies will go to, and I feel like a lot of people these days will be like, we want to replicate John Wick, and hopefully we do see some copycats that are at least moderately good, because I feel like, yeah, John Wick right now is doing stuff that other action films aren't doing, where, you know, we live, like, I always make fun of it a lot, but we do live in a day and age where, you know, we have too much shaky cam, it's too up close, because they don't spend the time or effort into action scenes for films, and it really bums me out, because, you know, I watch stuff like martial arts type of stuff, and you know, like certain Jackie Chan films, they spend like 6 months filming one fight scene. Now, I know that's sometimes not practical with a Hollywood film, but very much you can try your best in trying to do it, and try to get a really good action sequence. And I feel like John Wick does it in a really good way. And, you know, it takes them, like, they churn these things out. Like, it's 2 to 3 years per film, and they're really solid films. And, yeah, I just hope that in the future we'll have not only more John Wick films, but as well as hopefully action in the future will take this type of approach, because yeah, I really don't like the up close shaky cam, and I feel like this is the next generation of the great action films. So I highly recommend not only John Wick 3, but as well as 1 and 2. Basically, if you like, every other action movie that I've seen for a very long time has been inadequate basically, and this is pretty much the step forward for American Hollywood action films. So definitely give John Wick a watch, which I'm talking to you, by the way.
Look, you're preaching to the choir. I'm gonna make sure I watch it soon, because it definitely seems like almost like a prime time event. I don't know if movies can be prime time. I don't know, but it's like just like an event movie to watch, especially number 3. Is it called John Wick 3? Because I know the second one was called like Chapter 2 or something like that.
Yeah, I think John Wick was like, the second one's Chapter 2, and this one's John Wick 3, like Parabellum, which means full, prepare for war in France or something like that. Yeah. But yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. Is it set in France?
No.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, but no, it does go to places, and I just really love it. It's like, it in this day and age, do we really need something like a James Bond, or we really need something like a Jason Bourne, or like, I feel like the top action franchises, the top action franchises at the moment is like something like John Wick. And I still hold that like Kingsman does a really good job and different style to it.
I guess technically Fast and Furious, although I haven't watched any of the latest versions of them, those would technically be it, right?
But yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I feel like that holds a different space. Like, Fast and Furious is very much like John Wick is sort of set in realism, but it's kind of like almost like fake. I feel like Fast and Furious is like, we jump the shark on this, or jump the train, or jump the tank, or jump the whatever it is, where it's kind of like, we're going to go balls to the wall, who gives a shit, this makes no sense. Kind of like something like a Kingsman does. Like, Kingsman goes balls to the wall, but I feel like John Wick still has that semi-realism where you see Keanu Reeves and he's hurt, and you can see him being tired, and you can see him doing these things. It's like the little small things that you'd not pay attention to, but it just makes the world more like real. And that's what I think why people really like John Wick, is just the realism of the fights, the choreography, the way it's shot, and just the world building. I feel like all those things make a perfect package that basically is John Wick. And I think that's why it's kind of resonated with a lot of people because everyone's like, this is what an action film should be like, and I feel like we lost that, after like kind of like the mid '80s almost.
All right, I'll make sure to watch it.
Okay, just saying. But yeah, that will be us for this week. Did you know that you could always listen to us on Spotify and iTunes, and we do stream on YouTube, when we can, on the channel Marketing Movies. So until next time, maybe maybe Henry Cavill is our Superman, so we can spank the kid from Brightburn. So until next time, see ya.
Catch ya.